Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone out there, and welcome to episode number 237 of Buddhist Biohacker. I am your host, Lisa Gunshore. Welcome in, and we are here with one of my favorite guests, and I've missed you so much, Satyam. Welcome back.
Great to be with you here, Lisa. Great to be here. Yeah.
Oh, I miss our talks so much.
Yeah.
And I was so looking forward to today. And I was really looking forward to the topic for today, which is the Bhagavad Gita. So I'd love for you to take a minute. I know we are in a new season. We have new viewers that may or may not know who you are. Just take a minute to kind of explain who you are today. And then let's dive into the topic.
Great. Well, my name is Satyam. I've been on the yogic path for pretty much all my adult life since my early 20s. I'm now in my mid 50s. And it was really not just about practicing on the mat, but incorporating all the elements of yoga into daily life, from diet and dealing and all sorts of stuff. And I spent to make that transition, I spent a number of years living in India in various ashrams and really treat my house kind of as that these days. But I love to practice a meditation-based life, and I love all things yoga. And the great extent that yoga really is, that it's not a physical practice, it's not just meditation, but it touches on all spheres of life, and that's really what I love to share. And this topic allows us to do that. I also run Renaissance Yoga, and I'm right now sitting in North Carolina, though my general domicile is in Maryland.
Nice. Are you near the ocean then, where you are right now today?
I'm right down the street from Chapel Hill, or really just on the boundary. So I'm got to be an hour or two from the water.
Okay. Yeah. I'm dying for some water.
Yeah, right.
We have the beautiful mountains, though. So
yeah, you can't complain.
No, I can't complain in Colorado. That is for sure. Oh my goodness. Well, where do you want to start with Bhagavad Gita? Maybe we start with what it is, and I'm sure you've got lots of things to talk about.
Sure. So let's get a very big wide angle view here, and we'll slowly hone in on it. So we'll work like an hourglass, nice wide. Then we'll come right into the essence of it, and then we'll go out again into the vast teachings that it has. So it'll be an hourglass approach. So let's pull back. In India, there are two great epics. One is known as the Ramayana, and the other one is known as the Mahabharata. The Ramayana is Puran. It's mythology, and it's about King Ram. So two great epics means two great stories that are told over thousands of years, from generation to generation to generation to generation. Everyone in India knows this, although it's changing now as India becomes more and more materialistic, and those old, everybody's more involved in YouTube and all that, and all the internet culture is what I mean to say. The good and the bad, whatever it may be, and so naturally that starts to break the chain in that ongoing oral history, to the degree that the families are no longer living together, so forth, so on. But these two stories were told from thousands of years, and the Ramayana is Puran, it's mythology, and then the other one is the Mahabharata, means the unification of India, the great India, and that is known as educative history, that it's a historical event, but some of the telling of it has gone through quite a bit of liberty. It's just like if I think back to my childhood and the story is told, and then a couple decades later, the uncles, the aunts, the nephew, everybody's got their own story, their own rendition of it, and some of the facts become a little bit more loose, so to speak. Well, you can imagine what happened to a story that's 3,500 years old. It gets bendy and loses some of its. There are some things that are a little bit fantastical about, but they've done the archaeological digs, and it is an event take place. So then, what are we talking about here? We're talking about two great epics: the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and then what's the Bhagavad Gita? And the Bhagavad Gita is a very small chapter in the Mahabharata. It's a small chapter. And so a lot of people, both Western and Eastern scholars alike, have concluded that yes, there was an event in India, in the state of Haryana, north of Delhi, where this battle was fought and where these people lived. It was, and but a lot of people just aren't aware about the Mahabharata, and they read the Bhagavad Gita, and it starts. It's like the middle. So like, what's going on? What is this? And the Bhagavad Gita means literally song of the divine. Gita means song, and Bhagwan means divine. So it's the song of the divine, and it's happening within. It's a interaction between the two main people in this Mahabharata. So it's with this greater story, and scholars like have on East and West have concluded that yes, this was an actual event, and they've also found this is the longest story ever told. The Mahabharata, it's I don't know 22,000 couplets. It's enormous. It's enormous, and these days they may write it in prose, and like one of the editions I have is 1,100 pages. The Bhagavad Gita is 10 pages in that. It's 1%. So, and it's about 40% of the way through. So basically, when in a typical yoga teacher training class, they say, let's speak of the Bhagavad Gita, and it starts out in this field, and these two parties are about to go into battle, and no one knows why there was a battle, why this was going to occur.
Yeah, my question for you right out of the gate is like, why is that? Like, why is it that there's so much emphasis on this small piece?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Well, a lot of the Mahabharata is like family drama and intrigue, and not a lot about teachings. And almost all the great teachings of the Mahabharata are contained in the Bhagavad Gita, all the philosophical teachings.
Wow. Okay.
And so that makes it so there's a great interest in it for that reason. So basically, in the Mahabharata, in a nutshell, you've got one major dynasty, the Kuru dynasty, and there's a split in the family over the inheritance of the kingdom. There's the Pandavas and the Kauravas, and I did a full-length course on this. Full-length course means like over the course of 5 weeks with about 11 sessions. And if anyone's interested, they can contact me about that. But one of the things I learned from that is stick to the teachings. Don't try and recount the tale. As much as I'm familiar with the tale and love it, it just, you start telling it and it mushrooms and mushrooms and mushrooms. It's a never-ending saga of so many characters. So, but in a nutshell, you've got this family fight. And then you've got this term of dharma. And actually, I just did a course on the word dharma itself. But dharma, in our interest here, is that what is the righteous thing to do? Where does truth lie? And what is my course of action? What action should I take? And in this fight that's about to unfold between these two families, or two sides of the family, the Pandava, 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 Kaurava, Kao or Kau, Rava, Kaurava and Pandava, and they're cousins, basically. And the main warrior of one side is named Arjuna, and he's looked upon as the greatest archer of that time. And in humanity, there are different eras where, based on what people honor. And if you're good at that, then you get prestige. Now we live in the era of what the yogis would call Vaishyan era, capitalism. The people with the prestige, those with the most money in their pocket or in their bank account or in their stock portfolio, whatever. You have money, you get prestige in a simple. And there's also the Vipran era, the era of ministers and intellectuals. And those who have the most knowledge, they get prestige. And then there's the Kshatriyan era, the warrior era, the best fighters, they got the prestige. This fight took place 3,500 years ago in Delhi during the full-blown Kshatriyan era. So those warriors had tremendous prestige, tremendous clout, and Arjuna was looked upon as one of the most unparalleled archers of the day, a bow and arrow. And so this battle's about to take place, and he loses his gumption. He sees all his cousins, his uncles, his grandfathers, all his people who he grew up with. And he's like, I don't want to fight this. Now, his charioteer is Krishna. And so he and Krishna had gone out to look upon the battlefield. And this is where the Bhagavad Gita starts. About 40% of the way through the Mahabharata, there was an injustice done. Arjuna and his brothers are on the side of righteousness. They're doing for the welfare of the people. His cousin was devious, Duryodhana, and who wanted to kill them, annihilate them. He made assassination attempts and he cheated the people. He was a negative force. So there was a sense that this needed to happen. Now, before we go on with fight and war and battle, it's a really sensitive topic right now, because the teaching the Bhagavad Gita is mount your horns, get your forces, go fight. That's where it ends up. But it isn't fight for fight's sake. That there's a reason for it. And I also want that numerous attempts were made not to fight. So if you just read the Bhagavad Gita, it looks like some guy's supposed to fight, he's chicken, the other guy's convincing him to fight, and boom, they go into battle, basically. But the battle is not part of the Bhagavad Gita, but it's to talk about why the battle is necessary, why we must go fight. So it can read like, yet there's so many spiritual teachings, but it's around this notion of fight. And now with the way the world is today, people, that it's not a pretty scene. Fighting is not. There's not a lot of glory in it. It's unfortunate. It's tragic, and we should do everything we can as humanity not to fight. And I want to emphasize that whole first third of the Mahabharata, or a lot of it, is about how can we avoid war? How can we avoid? And to that, Arjuna, the main character, and his brothers underwent undue humiliation, unending humiliation to avoid fighting. And then they sent Krishna. Krishna went as a peace emissary. So they took so many steps not to fight. But sometimes things come to a head where you've got to stand your ground. And it happens. And as much as, so that's what, at the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, the guide for the Pandavas, he's looked upon as the great yogi of the time. He says at this point, all options have been exhausted. There's no other path, unfortunately. We've got to stand. And that's your dharma. As a Kshatriya, you're a warrior. So this is what you were born to do. So that's a little bit how it goes. And so when they have this talk, so I don't want to give the idea that this is like a wartime cry, but every attempt was made not to fight. But when the battle's lined up, and the Bhagavad Gita is it's all it is a discussion. It's a talk between Arjuna and Krishna. Krishna is the guide. He's the yogi king. He's looked upon as a divine form, divine being. And Arjuna is a great warrior. And Krishna is driving his chariot. He's the charioteer, and Arjuna is the great hero. But everybody knows that Krishna is the divine, and it's looked upon as divine being. And he takes Arjuna around to overlook the battlefield, and that's when Arjuna loses his will to fight. And Krishna's like, "Oh, what's going on? Why are you so queasy?" And it goes, and it's really this discussion where all the spiritual teachings are unfolding. And that's really what the Bhagavad Gita is. That someone who's fully trained to go into battle, that's his dharma to do that. He's on the fight of justice. He's not fighting for self-interest. And all these reasons of why he should fight, and that there's no option, all other options have been exhausted. And Krishna, who's looked upon as the embodiment of dharma, of righteousness, that just follow his guideline, you'll be on the right path, is telling him to fight. And Arjuna doesn't want to do it. And so the Bhagavad Gita is what? Krishna convincing Arjuna why he should fight, and Arjuna ultimately regaining his courage and joining the battlefield. So that's all the Bhagavad Gita is. It's a discussion. But within this discussion is some incredible teachings.
I can't wait to dive into them, because even just what you're saying about like how many of us have a dharma that we either are afraid to step into or don't want to step into. I mean, that's a conversation in its own. And want to throw out to everybody who's watching in the live, you feel free to share, how you relate to the story as we go here and discuss some of these teachings. And also, if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. But yeah, let's dive into these teachings.
Yeah, let's do that, because the teachings are really what's meaningful here, and they apply to today's life. And the first teaching is, don't remain in dilemma. That as human beings, we can never make every right decision. We're not omniscient. But this idea of should I or shouldn't I? Should I or shouldn't I? It rots the brain. It saps you of all your energy and vigor. And that's what's happening to Arjuna. He can't decide what to do. And Krishna, and as he thinks about it and hedges and haws, he just has become totally weak-kneed, and he loses all his psychic force. So, and as human beings, we always have to decide something, and some of those decisions we don't get full clarity on what to do. But this hemming and hawing, going back and forth, where you convince yourself one way, then you convince yourself another, it drains you, it saps you of your energy. Just pick one. If it's the wrong one, you'll figure it out soon enough and you'll get on the right one. If it's the right one, it'll become quickly apparent. But that's the one thing is, the yogis say, never remain in dilemma. Dilemma means when the mind is running in two directions. Dvida. It's running in two directions. And it makes us the most pathetic version of ourselves that we can become. And so take a stance and know that your intentions are good. You may not have the right path, but you'll get it. So this hemming and hawing is not to be, don't give in to that.
Yeah, I remember, there's a great saying that says, not making a decision is really deciding everything's going to remain the same.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes we know that we've got to decide something. We all have it, when we're 10, and no matter where we are in life, that it takes on whether you're 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50, 60 years old, when we meet those instances, they can become, that's really important. To the outsider, it doesn't look like a big deal, but when you're in it, it's, a big deal.
Yeah, so we got a question here from Tracy. She's asking, how does the meaning of the Sri Guru Gita fit in?
the meaning of the Sri Guru Gita. Sri in Sanskrit means charming, most charming. Guru is preceptor, one who removes the darkness. And Sri Guru Gita, Gita means song. I'm not sure if that's looked upon as, I'm not sure exactly what she's referring to with that question. Sri Guru Gita. It may be another text that I'm not familiar with. It may be, I'm not quite sure exactly where, I'm not sure what that.
Yeah, maybe elaborate, Tracy. And I'm wondering if it's a mantra or something.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. But so that's one thing, is don't remain in dilemma, take action. Another main teaching is a sense of duty. That we all have, we're duty bound in this world, and that we should really explore what is our true purpose in this world. And in today's materialistic society, where a lot of the aspects of life are based on material gain, sometimes we have to say, wait a second, is this my duty here? Is this what I should be bound to? Or is there some higher purpose of why I've come onto this earth? And so with a sense of duty, it's a big aspect of yoga that it's not a question of what you like or don't like. It's what we're bound to do in this world. And in family life, people have that always comes up, whether you're raising children, relationships with partners, your commitments or your relationship to the older generation before you, that life is not just choosing from one whim to the next, or one liking to the next, or one that there's something deeper that we have to hold to. And that builds trust in the society, and people will trust you that whether it's raining or shining, you're going to do the right thing. You're not just going to cop out and run after your own self-interest or your own self-indulgence or your own self-joy or pettiness, that you are going to hold on to a discipline and a commitment to something. And that's what Arjuna. So that's what Krishna is teaching Arjuna. He said, "Hey, you're a Kshatriya. You're a warrior. Now your time has come. You can't shirk the battle. Everybody's depending on you. You can't wallow in this self-pity and misery. You can't do that. You got to jump in." And, so duty, that we all have a sense of duty, and that we're. It is a prayer that I love seeing chanting. It was taken from some large text. It sounds like a wonderful chant and prayer. And I would say that Sri Guru Gita, that the song of the great Guru, or the song of the divine. It sounds like it's a beautiful prayer that would be right in line with the yogic teachings of that we should commit ourselves to supreme realization. And glorify that which is eternal. Yeah, thank you for that. That's wonderful. And one thing that's really nice about this sense of duty is that it leads to greater self-discovery. It forces us to look in and say, what is my purpose? What am I doing here? Am I just, following, the party line, or do I have some greater meaning here? And that builds character, integrity, and people think, okay, this person can be trusted. Yeah. And then another one is right to the action, but not to the result. You have the right. So that Krishna was saying, look, you don't have control over this situation. All you can do is take to the action. You don't have control over what the fruits thereof. And this is a big point in today's society, especially in materialism. People do everything for the fruit. And the yogis say that the results are not in your hand. You should do what is the dharmic action, what is the right thing to do. And then what the results are, that's not for you to choose. That so in this particular instance, Krishna's saying, look, you've got to dive into this. You're a kshatriya, you're a warrior. You've got to engage in this action. And then whatever happens, that's beyond what you don't have control over the results. And and today a lot of people it's so easy to pick up a job, not for the job itself, but what you think you'll get from that job. And so it's a different perspective. That you don't know what the outcome is going to be. You don't know what the response is going to be, and so you should just go on doing the right course of action. And so it's an interesting, different flip-flop approach from a lot of where you go into a job interview or you go into a schooling. If you do these 4 years, then you will be in position to. So a lot of it is going after low-hanging fruit in materialism. And and the yoga perspective is never do something for the end result. Do you do the action itself. Yeah.
That one's hard when you like to plan.
Yeah. It is. It's a big thing. That you're right. You're right. And you have to not be attached to what you think your future is supposed to be or going to be, which is a very difficult thing. Everything we've been taught is, and to not have, and the one thing that's freeing about it is you do it and then there's less disappointment involved. Let's say you're going to give a talk or you're going to plan something and it doesn't turn out the way you wanted. Then all your expectations, you're floored because your expectations weren't met. And it's very binding, actually. And it actually can be fear-inducing that, well, if I don't get the result, then what? Well, then I won't. Or if I don't get a lot of people, I think all of us have felt this at certain things that, well, the fear of not getting the right outcome that you want to get leads you to maybe not even engaging in the first place.
Yeah.
That's whole theories of expectations. Well, if I might not make the team, well, then I won't go to the tryout. I mean, so you got, and from the yoga perspective, this whole life is about tryout. You've got to engage. This whole world is looked upon as Kurukshetra, the field, the world of battle. We've come here to engage, and that's what we have to do. Yeah. So it's about overcoming expectations and not being attached to the results. You do it for the action itself. Yeah. Whereas every corporation, they're just concerned with their bottom line. What hell they do along the way, it doesn't matter. They can justify it by their bottom line. And as we see in capitalism, it's a disastrous approach that that a company may do something for their bottom line, for the fruit, but whether they polluted the river or whether they destroyed the forest or whether they put 50,000 people out of work, that's meaningless. They got their stock option, and so it's a very much capitalism is the exact opposite of it, or any materialistic approach. Yeah, where everything is done for your result. And then another thing is another teaching. I broke it down into 6 teachings. So one was sense of duty, one was right to the action, not to result. And then the next one is words that people may know about, heard about: karma, jnana, and bhakti. And these are looked upon as the 3 paths of yoga. Karma is the path of action. Gyan is the path of knowledge. And bhakti is the path of love or devotion. And and basically, those guys, Arjun, way back when, he was on the path of karma, a path of, it's looked upon as selfless action. And so what is karma yoga? Doing for the welfare of others, using your physical body, feeding the poor, helping anyone who needs physical help, or taking action for the welfare of others. And then the path of Gyan is using your knowledge to help others, using your knowledge and also, but those two paths, they're valuable, but they have to ultimately they have to come within the path of bhakti, so say the yogis. Because the problem with action is that you do the path of action and all of a sudden the ego starts saying, I did this, I did that, people should honor me for those actions. But what the teaching is, you have the right to the action, not to result. It doesn't mean that you should be heralded in the newspapers or made mayor of the township or revered and respected. You did the action for the action itself, not for the result. But the ego, that ego likes to jump in there and says, hey, did you see that? Did you see what I just did? I haven't seen anyone do that as good as I just did it. Right. So the ego always wants a little bit of respect. It wants its praise. So it's a tricky. So the yogis say, yes, you have to do karma yoga. You have to do selfless action, but it's not easy to keep it selfless. It's very easy to become self-centered by it. That, okay, I'm feeding that person, or I'm helping that person, but I should be honored by other people. Everybody should see. My photo should go in the newspaper. And it's a very difficult thing because the ego it can snatch us. So the yogis say, do selfless action and learn knowledge, gyan, follow the path of gyan. But gyan also has its vanity. No one's smart. No one's as smart as I. No one can explain this text as well as I can explain it. Did you see that essay I wrote? Did you? So both those two are karma and gyan, although they're very important, they're also a pitfall, and they can lead to ego. So the path of bhakti, they say, is the safest. It's a broad path where you're doing out of love and devotion. And so like the mother who breastfeeds the child, she's doing it for love of the child. She never thinks, oh, you're such a good mother. Rather, if someone praises her for breastfeeding a child, she's like, what nonsense is that? When you really love something, when you're committed to something, you think that this is the best thing, that I should do this, and you're ready to do and die for that, then the ego won't crop in, because you're committed to the welfare of something else, not yourself. It might be an ideal. It might be something that your object of ideation. So that cools down the ego. It chills it out. And then and because of that love and commitment, then you will do more work and you'll learn more to help others. So it's so ultimately we follow all three, and parceling out just karma or just gyan, they say that's the razor's edge. Very tricky. You can do it, but most people fall off that cliff. It's very tricky to walk that fine line, because the human ego is like that.
Yeah. Now, those paths, I assume they can all intermingle, right? Can you work the devotion piece while you're also in the knowledge piece or the action?
Right. Ultimately, once we become fueled by devotion, it'll spur you into action, and it'll spur you to learn into knowledge, because you'll need that knowledge to pursue. Yeah. So they do work together, and ultimately this bhakti has to be the path of bhakti has to be grounded in this sense of surrender, which is like one of the main spiritual teachings. That and you're surrendering your ego, you're surrendering your action, you're doing for the welfare of others, or for supreme entity, and so it needs that. And by surrendering the ego, then then we can have selfless action. And that's really what meditation is about. Meditation is from the yogic perspective, meditation is Jivatman to Paramatman, unit mind to cosmic mind, unit soul. So you can't move from small to big until you give up your small. If you think that, like a frog in a well thinks, I'm the king of this well. I'm that I am the king. There's nothing outside this well. And so long as he thinks that there's nothing outside this well and he's the king, he'll never discover the world all. And that well is just one teeny little piece in this greater world. And the unit ego's like that as long as we become attached to ego, we can't explore that whole realm of spirituality and So those are the three paths in a nutshell.
Okay.
Karma, Gyan, and Bhakti. And then this next one is pretty key. So basically, not to lose sight of the whole Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is going on that because he's saying, what have I come here for? What? And Krishna's telling him all these eternal truths. And Arjuna, who is really just an archer, not a philosopher, he becomes more and more involved. And he says, oh, Krishna, tell me the next step. How does one lead a good life? How does one become a good person? How does one achieve spiritual realization? So he comes to this point of, well, okay, I have my dharma, but how do I become a good person in this world? And Krishna tells him, you must have control. You must have a disciplined mind. The mind should control the body and not the body dragging the mind. Right? When you're driving down the street, the mind should be in control of where you're going. And the body should not just start taking you through each and every drive-through because you see the neon signs and you become attracted to those things. You're not hungry, but the sign says cherry-filled frosted donuts, and you go through that. So the point is that our 10 motor sensory organs, they should not be our brain, right? They should not do our thinking for us. And we should not be, because those motor sensory organs will just pull you into the realm of indulgence and will suffer from disease and all sorts of problems. Right? If we smoke everything that we can get our hands on, if we can drink everything that we get our hands on, if we indulge in all the 10 motor sensory, we'll destroy ourselves. That's what happens. That's the, whatever you want to call it, the Hollywood tragedy, right? They had the world, they had everything, but they lost themselves. They destroyed themselves. And so the yogis say, Indriya Nigraha, Indriya, the 10 motor sensory organs, have control over those things. And they use the allegory of the horses, of the chariot and charioteer, that in the Bhagavad Gita, they're about to have they fight from the charioteers and the horses pull. And the analogy is the 10 motor sensory organs are the horses. Don't let your horses run wild. There should be someone in firm control with the reins holding those horses so they go in the right direction. And similarly, our mind should be in full control of our 10 motor sensory organs. So it should have a disciplined mind. And we shouldn't give way to all our proclivities, right? If we get a little bit frustrated, it doesn't mean you just bop the next person in the nose. That you should have a mind that has control. And people recognize that in someone. They'll come talk to that person. They realize that person is leading a disciplined life, and they seem to have some greater wisdom, and they're not just running frivolously after so many indulgences. They have a sense of equanimity. So that's a big one. From the yogic perspective, how do you become a good person? Cultivate the mind, make the mind strong. Don't let the mind become a slave to your physical desires, but the mind should have firm, and then you'll be a very benevolent and you have a great efficiency. You'll be using your body in a proper manner. So that's teaching about how to kind of so we went through the point of dilemma, and then sense of duty, and right to the action, not to the results. And then the fourth one was the three paths, karma, gyan, and bhakti. And then so this fifth one is how to become a good person, that the mind should control our physical organs. And then before going into the sixth and seventh, really I have 8 of them here, 6, 7, 8. The main teaching, the main overall teaching of this Bhagavad Gita is that this whole universe is an expression of the one. And never lose sight of that. That's the main teaching. We're going through these 5, 6, 7, 8 teachings little by little. But the main over-encompassing teaching is that this whole cosmos is an expression of one, of consciousness. That it's all embedded, it's all rooted from there. And the easiest thing to see is differences and distinctions. And that these crude physical eyes, that person doesn't look like me, that person doesn't think like me, but we are all rooted in a sense of oneness. And that is, and that actually is that's how we lead a spiritual life. That we're not disconnected from anyone or anything. If I hurt someone, that isn't my greatness, and that isn't my revenge, or that isn't my self-satisfaction. Look, I got that guy. No, that was a part of what I'm also trying to become. And so that there's no victory in that. So sometimes it may be unavoidable, and you may have to do something, but it should never be out of your own spite or your own selfish. And that's where it becomes tricky. That's why Arjuna had so much trouble. He had to fight this fight that was Dharma, but he's like, I don't want to do that to those people. And yeah, in full sympathy, but sometimes you have to step in. But so Arjuna, when he's thinking, I don't want to fight, I can't do this. And Krishna's saying, what? This is all expression of the one. You're just doing your duty. You're not ultimately killing or hurting or harming. If you're doing it if you're doing it out of benevolence, and you're just a player in this grand drama, you have to do that. And Arjuna is like, no, I don't get that. That's not working for me. I don't understand that. And so Krishna, what he does, he unveils his Vishvarup, or universal form, and he puts Arjuna's mind in a state of samadhi where he only sees oneness. And his mind becomes suffused in that. And that ultimately that happens in meditation. That when the mind loses its ego, it will swim in that vast pool of consciousness. And that's what the yogis say is bliss. And so Krishna imparted that realization to Arjuna, where he realized that, look, we're all part of this never-ending cycle of birth and death until you pull out of this cycle. And so when you realize that oneness and you act for the welfare of that oneness, then you can act in these difficult situations. So so that's the greater teaching is that we're walking around in this world that looks like multiplicities, but it's really unicity. It's all parts of the same greater expression.
Yeah, and it aligns obviously with the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan teachings as well of bodhicitta and compassion and interdependent reality. We're all one. We're all interconnected. And it is amazing once you do have that realization and you can hold that oneness, that unity consciousness, compassion does come very easily.
Yeah. Everything becomes much easier. You'll feel like you'll feel at home in each and every situation. You won't feel that anyone's a foreigner, you or someone different. There's a greater connection. It's great for the mind. And at the same time, it's the easiest thing to forget, because we all have frustrations. We're all battling different our own deficits, maybe anger or fears or different things. But so that's why we have to meditate every day, to try and strive for that. And this is also related with this teaching of fruit right to the action, not to the fruit thereof. We should meditate and we don't have control over the fruits. We won't say, okay, I didn't feel peace today in my meditation, I'm not doing it again. No. Always we have to sit, and we have the duty to sit in meditation, to try and focus that mind. And then sometimes meditation is good, sometimes meditation bad, but it doesn't matter. Our job, our dharma is to sit and do the meditation. And then what realization we get, that will come in due course, or it may come that day. So we always have to, we're duty bound to sit in meditation, because that is what holds us on to the idea that, yes, we're part of a greater oneness. Yeah. And then living with that way, it's much easier to live in this world where you feel connected than you feel like one disparate entity. When you feel disparate, it leads to alienation, it leads to depression, it leads to neediness, all sorts of people become cowardly. And when you feel connected, you're riveted in, and you want to do for the welfare of others. And we've all gone through periods like that. And it's just that's human life, right? The ongoing striving for us to be at our best, where we feel connected and we can share our inherent gifts. So, yeah. So, a few more. Then this one. So, what is life and death? That's another big thing from the Bhagavad Gita. Yogic teachings are that death is nothing to be fearful of, and that you should not run from the battlefield, whatever that battlefield may be. And sometimes in life we don't want to do something for fear of the result, and that's a form of death right there, or of not willing to face the reality. But the yogis say, that this life is, when you go to bed at night, and then in the morning you put on new clothes and you go after it again, and you get all soiled and dirty, and you do your best, and then again you run out of energy and you go to sleep, and then again you put on fresh clothes and you go after it. They say that's what one life to the next. You do your best with this body, and then when it wears out, you'll get another one, and you do your best. So from the yogic perspective, until one gets supreme realization, you're just trying to elevate your mind more and more, and from life to life you get the body that you need to do the work so there's nothing in that sense. Death is just one more part of a chain link fence. It's not the finality. You're just moving on in your journey. But because you can't make the link, people think it's scary. Like right now, I'm living with my mom. I'm helping my mom out. And she loves to talk about when I was 2 years old, or when I was a baby, an infant. And she relives that all the time. She's like, "Oh, that was so beautiful." And that baby doesn't exist anymore. She cannot cuddle that baby in that state anymore. But she doesn't mourn the loss of that baby, because she sees me and she says, oh, she can connect from that baby to adolescence to young adulthood to now me with this gray beard. So she doesn't think, okay, the baby's gone. But true speaking, the baby is gone. She can't cradle baby. No, can't do that anymore. It doesn't work. But because she can track that link, she's not in despair about it. But where humans can't track that link is when the expiration of the physical body. Mind goes on, but so then that's when all the mourning comes. The mourning, MOU, that because the link is lost. The yogis say that as the mind will develop, we'll be able to follow that link from one life to the next. But we're not there at that point. So all of a sudden the physical body's gone. People are like, holy smokes, Fred was here today, he's gone. And it's like, and so death can be, even people who, mafia men, or people who just filled their pockets with, hundreds and billions of dollars. And on death's door, they're just like a drenched cat. They're weak and totally lost their vigor. They were bossing people around their whole life, and now they read up to death. And so they're not strong people. And so part of what we need to know part of the path of yoga is making the unknown known. And that's what happens in meditation. And death becomes a much more natural, you just move into, but we should never do that prematurely. We should live and as long as we can, maintain our physical body and fulfill our dharma. And when death comes, we don't know when and when, but then we embrace it. But it frees us from that. It's kind of like that. I'm not going to try out for the team because I'm scared that I may not. It's that sense of anticipation or sense of what might happen, or being scared, where like we become a deer in the headlights and we don't do anything. And as we eliminate those things, fear of the unknown is the greatest fear. That's if you really want to scare someone, make them scared of the unknown, because then in their own mind they'll blow that up into something gargantuan. And so the greatest unknown is death. And if that becomes kind of a known entity or something that you're at peace with while you're living, that's a tremendously freeing thing. Then you go on with your life and you're not bound by that menacing dark cloud. And so in yoga, there's three things that you talk about all the time: digestion, defecation, and death. I call them the 3 Ds. That whenever I was living in yoga ashram, we always end up talking about those 3 things because the elimination of the waste of the physical body. If you don't do that every day, you're going to become diseased. And digestion, if you're not having proper digestion, the mind can't concentrate. And death, if you don't know that death is going to come to you, then you won't take action that day. You don't have infinite time. You should think that any day you can be yanked from this world. So the yogi is like, hey, what do you think? You're going to sit on? You don't have time. Your time is limited. You don't know when it's going to end. So all those 3 things spur one into a right way of living and right way of acting, and it gives you a sense of courage.
Mm-hmm.
So death and look about something very, very natural. And that doesn't mean that you don't console those when people are grieving. I mean, there's a great sentiment involved, and you want to help them and support that. But yeah, so that's one of the things. And if you're free of that, then it's helpful. And then service, how to serve. This one of the teachings of how to serve this universe. That we can do service in 3 realms. So physical, psychic, and spiritual. And with our physical body, we can serve all our brothers and sisters around us. That's what we're supposed to do with our physical body, help. And our psychic body, we can serve by educating others, and also chanting, spiritual practice, psycho-spiritual domain, making our minds vast, and then ultimately in spiritual services is sadhana, that we can serve others and carrying out that, shedding our minds of our unit agenda, right? Mind, like what you were saying before, planning. As human beings, we love to plan. And typically, we plan those things that we think we'll like. But that may not be what's best for us, You ask a kid, what should you have for dinner? Well, we'll start off with licorice, then we'll have frozen ice cream, and then we'll conclude with butterscotch. And it's like, you can't survive on that type of diet. That you have that for dinner. Well, okay, once as a child, you do it once. But a lot of our plannings, especially in materialism, are plannings for indulgence, or plannings for what we think would be fun. But we don't plan what's dharmic. And so the yogis say you do what's dharmic in this world, and by doing what's dharmic, we're able to do service in those realms. So those are some of the teachings in a nutshell, and it's really a different way of looking at the world. At least from at this point, a lot of us who are living on the planet have grown up under the materialism. Either people who grew up in communism, which is a materialistic approach, or capitalism, and now we seem to be morphing. We're figuring it out that a little bit, and there's growing pains in that. But it's definitely a different way of looking at the world. And materialism means putting value in inanimate objects, right? If someone's a spiritual-minded person, it doesn't mean that that you have to walk around in tree bark, or that you don't have a car, or that you don't have a laptop. It just means putting those things in perspective. And materialism means we're basically giving honor to those who have the most amount to matter, the biggest swimming pool, the shiniest Rolls Royce, the largest mansion. And the yogis say that we're not physical beings, we're psychic beings, we're psycho-spiritual beings, and we should honor that aspect. That aspect of the human of the personality should be honored. Our psychic strength, our psycho-spiritual strength, those qualities of that engender what you were saying, Lisa, where love and compassion and forgiveness and those types of qualities become more really at our fingertips, part of our normal way, or part of our human personality, very natural, in a natural way. So, but it's a different, that's not the messages that we get. Growing up, one of the bumper stickers I saw around my high school is "Whoever dies with the most toys wins." Right? What can be more materialistic than that? Right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So it's a different outlook, and what and India those days, that was because it was not because it was India, or not because it was a particular land, but because yogis were guiding the society at that point. And now India, it's not like that really. They're becoming more and more materialistic each day, and kind of moving more in just in terms of general trend. Everybody has their own path. I recognize that, but and I think in the West, people are starting to maybe question this, the value of material. You say, okay, I got everything. Now what? It didn't solve my problems, So we're seeing this nice blending and merging, and whereas East meets West, and but those it's a different outlook than what the prevailing outlook is, at least in the West.
Yeah. Wow, this is so much great information. I will put timestamps in the show notes for everybody. So for each of these different pieces, I've been taking notes as we've been talking, Satyam, so that you can go back and listen to these different teachings. And I'm really glad you went through all these different teachings. I think it brings new light to what the Bhagavad Gita really means, and why anyone should pay attention to it, really. I mean, these are important teachings.
Yeah. And also that to show that yoga is not just the pose that you do on the mat, that yoga it's vast. It touches all aspects of our life, our whole mentality, our whole psychology, and that these teachings, the Bhagavad Gita, and really can also be looked at just as an allegory to jump into greater spiritual thought. And the teachings of yoga are vast. It's a vast universe of thought, and always fun to share, and great to be here and talk to you about this.
Yes, it's so nice to have you back on the show, and it's so nice to be back on the show, all of us. And I missed you so much. And take a quick minute before we close just to share how folks can find you and connect in with you.
Oh, sure. Thanks so much. Yeah, Renaissance Yoga is. But RENYOGA, Ren Yoga. Ren Yoga is my website, renyoga.com. You can also renyoga@gmail if you want to email me. And I'm on Instagram under Renaissance Yoga. So you can find me lots of different ways. And for those who are interested in pursuing more about the Bhagavad Gita and want to take that long class I have, it's all recorded, and anyone can jump in, and I'll be glad to mention this class, and you get a special deal. Mention this, mention Buddhist Biohacker and Lisa, and you get a special deal.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Satyam. This has been wonderful as always. And like I said, I'll get all of the timestamps up in the show notes and up on the podcast blog, so you guys can look for that to come out later today or tomorrow. And again, we're back every Thursday at noon. Next week, we'll be back with Deanna Hansen talking about fascia as consciousness. We love Deanna also. She is the founder of Black Therapy. So really excited about that. And for those of you who are going to be part of Biotransformation Labs on Saturday, we are going to be talking about mold on Saturday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. It's a free class, so you can just go on to my website, BuddhistBiohacker.com. Again, Satyam, I love you so much. And thank you everyone for listening.